The story of Daniel, a young noble from Judah, begins with a dramatic event that would forever change the course of his life. Amid the political turmoil of the ancient Near East, the powerful king Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon besieged Jerusalem, the holy city of the Jews. This siege was not just a display of military might, but the prelude to a profound cultural and spiritual transformation that would affect generations. Imagine the scene: a once vibrant city now surrounded by a relentless army. The walls that had long protected the people of Judah now seemed fragile against Babylonian strength. Among the young captives was Daniel, torn from his homeland and forced to embark on a journey to an uncertain destination. The cultural shock awaiting him was immense, as if he had been transported to another world. But what made Daniel extraordinary was not his noble lineage or privileged education. It was his unwavering faith in God, an anchor in the storm of exile. While many might have felt abandoned or betrayed by their God in such circumstances, Daniel saw this trial as an opportunity to strengthen his devotion. His attitude reminds us that sometimes it is in the most challenging moments that our faith is most needed and can become strongest. The young Daniel did not let captivity break his spirit. On the contrary, he adapted to his new reality without compromising his principles. This ability to adjust without losing essence is a valuable lesson for all of us in a constantly changing world. Like Daniel, we can learn to navigate challenging environments while keeping our integrity intact. Daniel's journey to Babylon was not just a physical trip, but a spiritual and emotional journey. He left behind everything he knew, his family, friends, and culture, to enter a new and potentially hostile world. Yet instead of succumbing to despair, Daniel chose to see this change as a mission. He understood that his presence in the Babylonian court might have a greater purpose. Daniel's exile teaches us about resilience in the face of adversity. How often do we feel exiled in our own lives? Perhaps in a new job, a new city, or even in challenging relationships. Daniel's story encourages us to maintain our faith and integrity, no matter where we are or what circumstances we face. Daniel's faith was not passive or hidden. It manifested in his daily actions, choices, and conduct. This reminds us that our belief should not be merely theoretical, but should be reflected in our daily lives. How can we live our faith practically and visibly, even in environments that may not be receptive to it? The Babylonian captivity could have been the end of the story for many, but for Daniel, it was just the beginning. His ability to maintain hope and faith in such adverse circumstances is a powerful testimony. He shows us that with the right attitude, even the most difficult situations can become opportunities for growth and positive impact. Daniel's story challenges us to reflect on how we react when our faith is tested. Do we bend under pressure or remain firm in our convictions? Daniel chose to remain faithful, not out of stubbornness or rebellion, but out of a deep conviction that his God was greater than any challenge he could face. As we delve deeper into Daniel's story, we will see how his unwavering faith led him to face even greater challenges. His journey teaches us that true strength does not come from favorable external circumstances, but from an unshakable internal conviction. How did Daniel navigate the complex corridors of Babylonian power without compromising his faith? This is the next part of his extraordinary story. Daniel and his companions' arrival in Babylon marked the beginning of a new phase in their lives. King Nebuchadnezzar, recognizing the potential of these young Jews, ordered that they be selected to serve in the royal court. This was not a common honor, but a formidable challenge. The young men would be immersed in the culture, language, and knowledge of the Chaldeans, a people renowned for their wisdom and scholarship. It was as if they had been enrolled in the most prestigious university of the time, with the goal of becoming advisors to the most powerful king in the world. The training program was rigorous and comprehensive. It included not only learning the Chaldean language, but also literature, history, astronomy, and the mystical arts for which the Babylonians were famous. Imagine the challenge of learning a new language, not just for casual communication, but for complex philosophical and scientific discussions. Daniel and his friends were essentially relearning how to think in a new language, a task that required extraordinary dedication and intelligence. Immersion in Babylonian culture presented a moral dilemma for Daniel and his companions. How could they absorb their captors' knowledge without compromising their faith and identity? This is a challenge many face today: how to navigate a world that often seems hostile to our core values. Daniel's response was to maintain a delicate balance, seizing the learning opportunity while standing firm in his convictions. One of the first tests came in the form of food. The king had ordered that the young men eat from the royal table, a diet likely to include foods forbidden by Jewish law. Here, Daniel demonstrated not only his faith but also his diplomatic wisdom. Instead of openly refusing, he proposed an alternative, a diet of vegetables and water. This approach teaches us the importance of seeking creative solutions when faced with ethical dilemmas, finding ways to respect our beliefs without alienating those around us. Babylonian education was not only academic, but also cultural and political. Daniel and his friends were learning the customs, etiquette, and protocols of the royal court. Imagine having to navigate the complex rituals and hierarchies of one of the most sophisticated courts of the ancient world. Every gesture, every word had meaning and consequences. This experience shaped Daniel not just as a scholar, but as a skilled diplomat and leader. Training in the Babylonian university was intense and competitive. Daniel and his companions were not just studying, but competing with the best and brightest young people of Babylon. This required not only intelligence but also perseverance and strength of character. They had to prove their worth every day, overcoming not just academic challenges, but also prejudices and suspicions as captive foreigners. Daniel's education in Chaldean literature exposed him to a wide range of texts, from ancient epics to philosophical treatises. This broadened his worldview, allowing him to understand and appreciate other cultures without losing his own identity. This ability to understand and communicate effectively with people from different backgrounds would be crucial in his future role as a royal advisor. The study of Babylonian astronomy was particularly challenging. The Chaldeans were famous for their advanced understanding of the heavens, using it not only for scientific purposes, but also for divination. Daniel had to carefully navigate this field, appreciating the scientific knowledge while rejecting practices that conflicted with his faith. This teaches us the importance of discernment when absorbing new knowledge. The friendship between Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah was crucial during this training period. Together they formed a mutual support group, encouraging each other to remain faithful to their beliefs while excelling in their studies. This alliance reminds us of the importance of finding communities that share our values, especially in challenging environments. Training in the Babylonian court also exposed Daniel to the complexities of international politics. He was learning about the relations between the great empires of the time, alliances, wars, and palace intrigues. This knowledge would be invaluable in his future role as an advisor, allowing him to navigate the turbulent waters of ancient Middle Eastern politics skillfully. As their training progressed, Daniel and his friends began to stand out. Their dedication, intelligence, and integrity set them apart from their peers. This did not go unnoticed by their instructors, and eventually by the king himself. Their success demonstrates that it is possible to achieve excellence without compromising moral principles. Daniel's education was not limited to secular knowledge. Alongside his official studies, he continued to deepen his understanding of Jewish scriptures and traditions. This dedication to his spiritual heritage, even in a foreign environment, is a testament to his strength of character and the depth of his faith. Training in the Babylonian court was also preparation for royal service. Daniel was learning not only theoretical knowledge, but also practical skills in governance, diplomacy, and leadership. He was being shaped to become not just a wise man, but a statesman capable of advising kings and influencing the course of history. As the training period drew to a close, Daniel and his friends faced a final test, an evaluation before King Nebuchadnezzar himself. This crucial moment would determine not only the success of their education, but potentially the course of their lives. The pressure was immense, but they trusted that their dedication and faith had prepared them adequately for this challenge. As Daniel completed his formal education in Babylon, he was about to enter a new phase of his journey. His years of study had prepared him not only with knowledge, but with strengthened faith and refined character. He was ready to face the challenges awaiting him in the royal court, where his wisdom and integrity would be tested in ways he could scarcely imagine. The young captive was about to become one of the most trusted and respected advisors in the most powerful empire of the ancient world. The court of Nebuchadnezzar was a place of opulence and excess, where royal banquets were legendary for their extravagance. Imagine tables laden with the finest delicacies, rare wines, and exotic dishes from all parts of the vast Babylonian Empire. For many young people, the prospect of indulging in such luxuries would be irresistible. However, for Daniel and his companions, this abundance represented a profound moral and spiritual dilemma. The Jewish law, with its strict dietary restrictions, was more than a set of dietary rules. It was a fundamental part of the identity and faith of the people of Israel, a way to remain separate and faithful to their God amid foreign cultures. Daniel knew that consuming the food from the royal table was not just a matter of preference, but an act that could compromise his spiritual integrity. Faced with this challenge, Daniel could have chosen several paths. He could have conformed, justifying that he was merely following orders, or that as a captive he had no choice. Alternatively, he could have openly rebelled, categorically refusing to eat the offered food. Instead, Daniel opted for an approach that demonstrated both wisdom and courage. With respect and diplomacy, Daniel proposed a test to the chief of the eunuchs, the official responsible for the young men in training. He suggested an alternative diet of vegetables and water for 10 days. This proposal was not only a practical solution to his dilemma, but also an act of deep faith. Daniel was essentially placing his trust in God, believing that the Lord would sustain them and make them prosper even with a simple diet. Daniel's request was risky. If he and his friends appeared less healthy after the 10 days, the chief of the eunuchs could face the king's wrath. Daniel's proposal demonstrates a crucial characteristic of mature faith: the ability to trust God even when the potential consequences are severe. He was not asking for a spectacular miracle, but trusting in God's constant and faithful provision. During the 10-day test, Daniel and his friends remained faithful to their simple diet. Imagine the challenge of resisting the temptations of royal delicacies, especially when everyone around them indulged freely. This discipline was not only physical, but also spiritual, a form of fasting and devotion in an environment hostile to their faith. Daniel's choice of a diet of vegetables and water was not just about avoiding forbidden foods. It was a declaration that his identity and values were more important than comfort or status. In a world where we are often pressured to conform, Daniel's stance challenges us to remain faithful to our principles, even when it means going against the tide. As the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. Instead of becoming weak or ill, Daniel and his friends appeared healthier and more vigorous than their peers who ate from the royal table. This outcome was not only a validation of Daniel's faith, but also a silent testimony to God's power to those around him. The success of Daniel's experiment had implications that went beyond his personal situation. It demonstrated that it was possible to maintain spiritual integrity without sacrificing excellence in their duties. This set an important precedent, showing that faithfulness to God and service to the king were not mutually exclusive. The reaction of the chief of the eunuchs to the test's result is noteworthy. Impressed by the healthy appearance of Daniel and his friends, he allowed them to continue with their chosen diet. This positive response reminds us that often, our faithfulness to principles can earn the respect even of those who do not share our beliefs. The episode of Daniel's diet was not just a test of faith, but also a lesson in leadership. By proposing a solution that respected both his convictions and the responsibilities of the chief of the eunuchs, Daniel demonstrated wisdom and consideration for others. This approach of seeking solutions that benefit all parties is a valuable lesson in negotiation and conflict resolution. Daniel's experience with the diet also teaches us about the power of example. His fellow trainees and possibly even some Babylonians must have observed Daniel's choice and its results with curiosity. Sometimes our actions speak louder than our words, and the integrity demonstrated silently can have a profound impact on others. This episode set a pattern for the rest of Daniel's life in Babylon. He would continue to face challenges to his faith, some far more dangerous than the issue of diet. However, this first victory strengthened his resolve and confirmed his trust in God. preparing him for the future tests he would face. The story of Daniel's diet is not just about food or physical health. It is a powerful metaphor for nurturing our spiritual life amid an environment that may be hostile or indifferent to our faith. Just as Daniel chose foods that would sustain him better, we are challenged to make choices that nourish our soul and strengthen our relationship with God. As news of Daniel's success spread, he and his friends gained not only respect, but also a platform of influence. Their faithfulness in an apparently small matter opened doors to greater responsibilities. This reminds us that integrity in everyday matters can prepare and position us for roles of greater impact in the future. One dark night, the powerful King Nebuchadnezzar was tormented by a disturbing dream. Upon waking, he found himself in a state of agitation and confusion, unable to recall the details of the dream that had so troubled him. This was no ordinary nightmare, but an event that would shake the foundations of the Babylonian Empire and reveal Daniel's extraordinary gift. Determined to uncover the mystery of his forgotten dream, Nebuchadnezzar summoned his wisest advisors, astrologers, magicians, and soothsayers. The task he imposed on them was seemingly impossible, not only to interpret the dream, but first to reveal its content. In his paranoia and frustration, the king issued a cruel ultimatum: decipher the dream or face execution. The royal court was thrown into a tumult of panic and despair. The wise men, confronted with a task beyond their abilities, pleaded with the king for mercy and additional time. Their pleas fell on deaf ears, as Nebuchadnezzar, convinced of a conspiracy, ordered the execution of all the wise men in the kingdom. It was at this moment of crisis that Daniel stepped forward. Informed of the situation by Arioch, the captain of the royal guard tasked with the executions, Daniel demonstrated remarkable courage. Instead of hiding or fleeing, he presented himself before the king, asking for time to decipher the dream's enigma. This brave action not only saved his own life, but also those of all the wise men of Babylon. Returning to his quarters, Daniel gathered his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, for a night of intense prayer. Together they pleaded with God for mercy and wisdom. This act of collective faith reminds us of the importance of spiritual community in times of crisis. Daniel did not face this challenge alone, but sought the support and prayers of his fellow believers. During the night, in a vision, God revealed to Daniel not only the content of the king's dream, but also its interpretation. Imagine the relief and gratitude Daniel must have felt at that moment. This experience reinforced his conviction that God is the source of all wisdom, and that he answers the sincere prayers of his servants. The following morning, Daniel was brought before the king. Before the assembled court, he made a surprising declaration. No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can reveal to the king the mystery he is asked about, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. With these words, Daniel was not only preparing to reveal the dream, but also testifying to the power and wisdom of the God of Israel. Daniel then proceeded to describe Nebuchadnezzar's dream in vivid detail. The king had seen a colossal and impressive statue with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet partly of iron and partly of clay. The precise description left Nebuchadnezzar astonished, confirming that Daniel truly possessed supernatural knowledge. But the revelation of the dream was just the beginning. Daniel continued, offering the divine interpretation. The statue, he explained, represented a succession of kingdoms, beginning with Nebuchadnezzar's own Babylonian empire, symbolized by the head of gold. The subsequent kingdoms, though powerful, would be progressively inferior, culminating in a divided and fragile kingdom. The climax of the interpretation came with the description of a stone, not cut by human hands, that struck the statue, shattering it to pieces that were blown away by the wind. This stone, in turn, became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. Daniel explained that this symbolized God's eternal kingdom, which would replace all earthly kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar's reaction to the interpretation was dramatic. Impressed by Daniel's wisdom and the greatness of the God he served, the king prostrated himself before the young Hebrew, offering him honors and gifts. This moment marked a turning point in Daniel's position at the Babylonian court. elevating him from a mere captive to a respected and influential advisor. The episode of Nebuchadnezzar's dream was not only a personal triumph for Daniel, but also a powerful demonstration of God's power and sovereignty. Through this event, God not only saved the lives of Daniel and the other wise men, but also proclaimed his supremacy over the kingdoms of the earth, including the mighty Babylonian Empire. For us, the story of Daniel interpreting the dream offers valuable lessons. It reminds us of the importance of prayer in times of crisis, the courage to face seemingly impossible challenges, and the humility to recognize that all wisdom and understanding come from God. Like Daniel, we are called to trust in God and to testify to his greatness, even in hostile environments. Daniel's success in interpreting the dream opened doors to greater responsibilities and challenges. His faithfulness in a crucial task paved the way for future opportunities to influence the course of history and be a light for the God of Israel in the heart of the Babylonian Empire. As we move forward in Daniel's story, we will see how his faith continues to be tested and strengthened through even more intense trials. King Nebuchadnezzar, intoxicated by power and pride, ordered the construction of a colossal gold statue. Erected on the plain of Dura, this imposing image was a testament to the greatness and vanity of the Babylonian monarch. With its impressive dimensions, the statue dominated the landscape, a gleaming symbol of the king's absolute authority. A royal decree was proclaimed. At the sound of musical instruments, everyone was to bow down and worship the golden statue. The order was clear, and the consequences for disobedience were terrifying. Anyone who refused to worship would be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace. This was not just a display of power, but a test of absolute loyalty to the king and the empire. Among the crowd gathered for the dedication ceremony were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Daniel's companions. These young Hebrews, who had maintained their faith through years of exile and service in the Babylonian court, now faced their greatest challenge. The choice before them was clear: compromise their faith and save their lives, or remain faithful to their God and face a horrible death. When the music began to play and the crowd bowed in worship, the three young men stood tall. Their refusal to bow did not go unnoticed. Quickly, envious informants rushed to report the Hebrews' disobedience to the king. The news enraged Nebuchadnezzar, who ordered that the three be brought immediately before him. In the presence of the furious king, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah stood firm in their conviction. When questioned, their response was a powerful testimony of faith and courage. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. These words, filled with conviction and devoid of fear, further enraged the king. In his fury, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The heat was so intense that the soldiers tasked with throwing the young men into the fire were consumed by the flames. The scene was one of terror and expectation, as the court watched what seemed to be the inevitable end of the faithful Hebrews. Bound and fully clothed, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were thrown into the heart of the blazing furnace. The crowd expected to see their bodies instantly consumed by the flames. However, to everyone's astonishment, including the king's, something extraordinary happened. Instead of cries of agony, the sound of footsteps and voices came from within the furnace. Incredulous, Nebuchadnezzar approached the furnace and looked inside. What he saw left him astonished. Not 3, but 4 figures were walking freely among the flames, completely unharmed. The 4th man the king described looked like a son of the gods. This divine manifestation not only protected God's faithful servants, but also demonstrated the power of the God of Israel over the gods of Babylon. Calling them out, Nebuchadnezzar witnessed an even greater miracle. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah emerged from the furnace without a single hair scorched, their clothes intact, and without even the smell of smoke. The divine protection was so complete that not even the extreme heat had left any mark on them. This miraculous event had a profound impact on Nebuchadnezzar. Confronted with such a demonstration of divine power, the king could do nothing but acknowledge the greatness of the Hebrews' God. he issued a new decree, forbidding anyone to speak against the God of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and promoted the three young men to higher positions of authority in the kingdom. The story of the fiery furnace is more than a tale of miracle and deliverance. It is a powerful testament to God's faithfulness to those who remain loyal to Him, even in the face of death. The three young men did not know if they would be spared, but chose integrity over self-preservation, trusting that God would be with them regardless of the outcome. This episode also teaches us about the nature of true worship and loyalty. While the crowd bowed to an idol out of fear and conformity, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah showed that true worship comes from the heart and cannot be forced or coerced. Their refusal to compromise, even under the threat of death, is a powerful example of integrity and moral courage. The presence of the fourth man in the furnace is seen by many as a prefiguration of Christ, the Son of God, who walks with us through our most fiery trials. This image reminds us that in our most difficult moments, we are not alone. God is present, protecting and sustaining those who trust in Him. For us today, the story of the fiery furnace offers encouragement and challenge. It encourages us to stand firm in our convictions even when we face pressure to conform. It challenges us to trust in God, not only for deliverance, but for the strength to remain faithful, regardless of the circumstances. As Daniel and his friend's story continues to unfold, we see a pattern of rewarded faithfulness, and God revealing Himself powerfully through the lives of His faithful servants. The next chapter of this saga will take us back to Nebuchadnezzar, where another dream and another interpretation will reveal even more about God's character and plans. After years of conquests and the expansion of the Babylonian Empire, King Nebuchadnezzar found himself at the height of his power. His palaces were magnificent, his hanging gardens amazed the world, and his word was law across vast expanses of land. However, the king's pride was about to be challenged by a night vision that would shake his understanding of power and authority. One night, while resting in his palace, Nebuchadnezzar was visited by a disturbing dream. Before his eyes, a majestic tree rose, so tall that it seemed to touch the heavens. Its branches extended to the ends of the earth, providing shelter for animals and food for all creatures. It was a vision of abundance and dominion, reflecting Nebuchadnezzar's own kingdom. But the scene quickly changed. A heavenly being, described as a watcher, a holy one, descended from the heavens with an alarming decree. The order was clear and relentless. Chop down the tree and cut off its branches. The magnificent tree was to be reduced to a stump, bound with iron and bronze, left to the elements and the animals of the field. The dream continued with an even more shocking revelation. The voice declared that the heart of a man would be changed to the heart of a beast, and that 7 times would pass over him. This dramatic transformation had a clear purpose, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone He wishes. Shaken by this vision, Nebuchadnezzar again summoned his wise men and advisors. As before, none could interpret the dream. Then Daniel, known in the court as Belteshazzar, was brought before the king. Remembering Daniel's previous wisdom, Nebuchadnezzar placed his hopes on him to decipher this new enigma. Hearing the dream, Daniel was astonished and troubled. For an hour he remained silent, struggling with the implications of the vision. The king, sensing Daniel's hesitation, encouraged him to speak freely. This dramatic pause reminds us that sometimes the most needed truth is also the hardest to speak. With courage and compassion, Daniel began to interpret the dream. The magnificent tree, he explained, represented Nebuchadnezzar himself. His kingdom had grown and become powerful, his influence extended across the earth. However, the decree to cut down the tree was a divine warning. The king's pride had gone too far. The interpretation continued with a grim prediction. Nebuchadnezzar would be driven away from human society and would live with the animals of the field. Like an ox, he would eat grass and be drenched with the dew of heaven. This state would last for 7 times, interpreted as 7 years, until the king acknowledged that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men. Daniel, showing remarkable compassion for a king who had previously threatened his life, concluded his interpretation with urgent advice. He implored Nebuchadnezzar to renounce his sins, practice righteousness, and show mercy to the oppressed. There was hope, Daniel suggested, that sincere repentance could prolong his prosperity. Unfortunately, Daniel's warning fell on deaf ears. 12 months passed, and Nebuchadnezzar, walking on the roof of his palace, boasted of his greatness. "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" Little did he know that his words would seal his fate. The moment these words left his mouth, a voice from heaven declared that the kingdom had been taken from him. Immediately, the prophecy began to be fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar was driven away from human society, eating grass like cattle and living exposed to the elements, his body drenched with the dew of heaven. For 7 long years, the once powerful king roamed like a beast, his appearance becoming wild and unkempt. This period of humiliation was not just a punishment, but a profound lesson on the transitory nature of human power and the supreme sovereignty of God. Finally, after the predicted 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar's reason was restored. In a moment of clarity, he lifted his eyes to heaven and for the first time, truly acknowledged the sovereignty of the Most High God. This act of humility and worship marked the end of his trial and the beginning of his restoration. The account concludes with Nebuchadnezzar restored to his throne, his honor and splendor returned. But the king who returned was profoundly different from the one who had been humbled. His final words in the book of Daniel are a hymn of praise to the King of Heaven, acknowledging that all his acts are just and that he is able to humble those who walk in pride. This powerful narrative offers timeless lessons about pride, humility, and the sovereignty of God. It reminds us that all earthly power is temporary, and that true wisdom lies in recognizing our dependence on God. As Daniel's story continues, we will see how these lessons unfold in even more dramatic events, culminating in one of the most famous scenes in the Old Testament. Years passed since the events involving Nebuchadnezzar, and now Belshazzar, his successor, reigned over Babylon. On a fateful night, the young king decided to hold a grand banquet for 1,000 of his nobles. Wine flowed freely, and the sound of laughter and lively conversations echoed through the palace halls. Belshazzar, intoxicated by the wine and his own arrogance, had an idea that would seal his fate. He ordered that the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem be brought in. These sacred objects, intended for the worship of the God of Israel, were profaned as the king and his guests used them to drink wine while praising their gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly, the festive atmosphere was interrupted by a supernatural event. The fingers of a human hand appeared and began writing on the wall of the royal hall, near the lampstand. King Belshazzar, witnessing this inexplicable event, turned pale with fear. His legs trembled, and his knees knocked together, so great was his terror. Desperate for answers, Belshazzar shouted for the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners to be brought in. He promised that whoever could read and interpret the writing would be clothed in purple, receive a gold chain around their neck, and be made the 3rd highest ruler in the kingdom. However, despite their efforts, none of Babylon's wise men could decipher the mysterious message. The inability of the wise men to interpret the writing increased the king's panic. The queen, hearing the commotion, entered the banquet hall. She reminded Belshazzar of Daniel, who had served during Nebuchadnezzar's reign and was known for his extraordinary wisdom and ability to interpret dreams and enigmas. Daniel was quickly summoned to the king's presence. Belshazzar, still visibly shaken, repeated his offer of rewards for anyone who could interpret the writing. Daniel, however, politely declined the rewards, stating that he would interpret the message regardless. Before revealing the meaning of the writing, Daniel reminded Belshazzar of Nebuchadnezzar's story. He spoke of how the former king had been humbled by God due to his pride, and how he had finally acknowledged the sovereignty of the Most High God. Daniel then rebuked Belshazzar for not learning from his predecessor's example, and for profaning the sacred vessels from the temple. Finally, Daniel turned his attention to the writing on the wall. The mysterious words were Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. With a firm voice, he began to interpret the meaning of each word to the astonished king and his court. Mene, Daniel explained, means numbered. God had numbered the days of Belshazzar's reign and brought it to an end. The repetition of the word emphasized the certainty and immediacy of this judgment. Tekel means weighed. Belshazzar had been weighed on the divine scales and found wanting. His reign and character had been evaluated by God and found lacking. Peres, the singular form of Parsin, means divided. Belshazzar's kingdom would be divided and given to the Medes and Persians. This final part of the interpretation was a specific prediction of the imminent fall of the Babylonian Empire. Despite the grim nature of the interpretation, Belshazzar kept his promise. Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. However, these honors would be short-lived. That very night, while the city slept, unaware of the approaching danger, the Medo-Persian army, led by Cyrus, invaded Babylon. The city, considered impregnable, fell with surprising swiftness. Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, was killed, thus fulfilling the prophecy pronounced by Daniel only a few hours earlier. The great Babylonian Empire, which had dominated the Middle East for decades, came to an end, replaced by the Medo-Persian Empire. With the fall of Babylon, a new era began for Daniel and the Jewish people in exile. The next chapter of his life would lead him to face new challenges and dangers, culminating in one of the most famous episodes of his story, the Lion's Den. With the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire, Darius the Mede took control of Babylon. Recognizing Daniel's wisdom and integrity, the new king appointed him as one of the 3 chief administrators of the kingdom, planning to place him over the entire government. Daniel soon distinguished himself above all the administrators and satraps due to his excellent work. His competence and honesty were so remarkable that King Darius considered putting him in charge of the whole kingdom, a position of immense power and prestige. This favoritism, however, aroused the envy and resentment of the other officials. Determined to find a way to discredit Daniel, they meticulously investigated his conduct in governmental affairs, but could find no evidence of corruption or negligence. Realizing that they could not find any faults in Daniel's professional conduct, the conspirators turned their attention to his religious life. They knew that Daniel was devout to his God, and that nothing would make him compromise his faith. The conspirators then devised a cunning plan. They approached King Darius with a flattering proposal. A royal decree stipulating that for 30 days no one could make any petition to any god or man except the king. Any violation would be punished by death in the lion's den. Darius, unsuspecting of the true intention behind the decree, was flattered by the idea. He signed the document, making it a law of the Medes and Persians, which could not be revoked. When Daniel learned of the decree, he did not alter his routine. As was his custom, he continued to go to his house 3 times a day, opening the windows facing Jerusalem, kneeling and praying to his God. His devotion was more important to him than any human law or threat of death. The officials who had been spying on Daniel found him praying and making petitions to his God. Immediately they went to the king to report Daniel's disobedience to the royal decree. Hearing the accusation, King Darius was deeply distressed. He realized he had been manipulated and that his decree would condemn a man he respected and admired. The king spent the rest of the day trying to find a way to save Daniel. However, by sunset, the officials reminded Darius that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree signed by the king could be changed. Reluctantly, Darius gave the order for Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. Before Daniel was cast in, Darius said to him, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A large stone was placed over the mouth of the den and sealed with the king's signet ring and the rings of his nobles. The king spent the night fasting, refusing entertainment and losing sleep. At dawn, he hurried to the lion's den. With an anguished voice, Darius called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" To the king's relief and joy, Daniel's voice responded from the den, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight." Exultant, Darius ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. No wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were thrown into the lion's den along with their families, and the lions overpowered them before they reached the floor. King Darius then issued a decree to all the people in his kingdom, commanding them to fear and reverence the God of Daniel. Daniel, for his part, prospered during the reign of Darius, and also in the reign of Cyrus the Persian, his influence and wisdom continuing to shape the events of the empire. After the fall of Babylon, Darius the Mede took control of the kingdom. Recognizing Daniel's exceptional wisdom, the new monarch appointed him as one of the 3 chief administrators, with plans to elevate him above the entire government. Daniel soon distinguished himself among all the officials due to his unparalleled competence and integrity. His excellence was so remarkable that King Darius considered placing him in charge of the entire empire, a position of immense power and prestige. This favoritism, however, aroused the envy and resentment of the other officials. Determined to discredit Daniel, they meticulously investigated his conduct, but could not find any evidence of corruption or negligence in his governmental affairs. Frustrated by their inability to find professional faults, the conspirators turned their attention to Daniel's religious life. Knowing his unwavering devotion, they devised a cunning plan. They proposed a flattering decree to King Darius. For 30 days, no one could make petitions to any god or man except the king, under penalty of death in the lion's den. Darius, unsuspecting of their true intention, was flattered by the idea and signed the document, making it an irrevocable law of the Medes and Persians. When Daniel learned of the decree, he did not alter his prayer routine. 3 times a day, as usual, he went to his house, opened the windows facing Jerusalem, knelt and prayed to his God. His devotion was more important to him than any human law or threat of death. The officials who had been spying on Daniel found him praying and immediately reported him to the king for violating the decree. Upon hearing the accusation, Darius was deeply distressed, realizing that he had been manipulated and that his decree would condemn a man he respected. The king spent the day trying to find a way to save Daniel, but at sunset, the officials reminded him that the law could not be changed. Reluctantly, Darius gave the order for Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. Before the sentence was executed, the king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A large stone was placed over the mouth of the den and sealed with the signet of the king and his nobles. Darius spent the night fasting, refusing entertainment, and losing sleep. At dawn, he hurried to the lion's den, and with an anguished voice called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" To the king's relief and joy, Daniel's voice responded from the den, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight." Exultant, Darius ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. No wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. By the king's order, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were thrown into the den along with their families. The lions overpowered them before they reached the floor. This act of divine justice demonstrated the seriousness with which God viewed the unjust persecution of his faithful servant. King Darius, deeply impacted by these events, then issued a new decree for his entire kingdom. He commanded that everyone should fear and reverence the God of Daniel, recognizing him as the living God whose kingdom will never be destroyed. The decree exalted God's power, who performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. Daniel's experience in the lion's den became a powerful testimony to God's faithfulness and power. Not only was Daniel miraculously preserved, but the event also led to the proclamation of God's greatness throughout the empire. Daniel's courage and unwavering faith in the face of certain death have inspired generations of believers to remain faithful amid persecution. His story demonstrates that obedience to God, even when confronted with unjust laws or threats to life, can result in a powerful testimony. The miraculous deliverance of Daniel had a profound impact not only on his own life, but on the entire kingdom. His position of influence was strengthened, and he prospered during the reign of Darius, and also in the subsequent reign of Cyrus the Persian. Daniel's wisdom continued to shape the events of the empire, and his reputation as a man of integrity and spiritual power grew even more. This episode also established an important precedent for future Persian leaders in their treatment of the Jewish people and their religion. The story of Daniel in the lion's den became one of the most well-known and beloved accounts in the Bible. It captures the imagination with its drama, suspense, and miraculous divine intervention. More than that, it illustrates fundamental themes of faith: the importance of constant prayer, the courage to remain faithful to God even in the face of death, and God's power to deliver His servants. The narrative also highlights the consequences of envy and manipulation, as well as God's sovereignty over human affairs. In the years that followed, Daniel continued to serve in the Persian government, but his experience in the lion's den remained a powerful testament to his faith and the power of his God. This event not only solidified his reputation among the Persians, but also strengthened the faith of the exiled Jewish people. Daniel's story reminded the exiles that even in a foreign land, under the rule of pagan kings, their God was still in control and capable of performing miracles on their behalf. Thus, the episode of the lion's den became not just a chapter in Daniel's life, but a lasting symbol of faith, courage, and divine protection. The story of Daniel, from his capture in Jerusalem to his experiences in Babylon, is a powerful testimony of faith, resilience, and divine sovereignty. From the beginning, Daniel and his friends faced intense challenges to maintain their devotion to God in a hostile and pagan environment. Their choices, such as refusing to defile themselves with the king's delicacies and bravely facing death in a fiery furnace, reveal an unwavering trust in God. Daniel stood out not only for his faith, but also for his wisdom and ability to interpret divine dreams and visions, which often brought important revelations to the kings he served and to God's people. The interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, the writing on the wall at Belshazzar's feast, and survival in the lion's den are clear examples of how God worked through Daniel to demonstrate His power and sovereignty. Additionally, the apocalyptic visions received by Daniel provide a glimpse into the future, highlighting the transience of human kingdoms compared to the eternity of God's kingdom. These visions not only foresee future conflicts and the end times, but also reinforce the certainty that, despite tribulations and challenges, God's will shall prevail. Daniel's story is an eternal reminder of the importance of remaining faithful, trusting in divine wisdom and power, and recognizing that even amid adversity, God is present, guiding and protecting those who serve Him. Through his experiences, Daniel teaches us that true greatness lies in faith and obedience to God, who reigns over all kingdoms and whose justice and mercy are infinite.